Hi everyone, welcome and good afternoon. Welcome to Managing Your Work, Your MEWP Equipment webinar. So today we will dive into the essential aspects of effective management mobile elevated work platform. Our focus will center on safety planning and training to ensure optimal use of MEWP across various applications. So here are some key takeaway from today's session. Understanding the essential of MEWP management, best practice for ensuring safety in MEWP operations, effective planning strategies for various MEWPs, training tips to optimize MEWP usage. So before I introduce our esteemed speakers, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our sponsors for making this webinar special and possible. So for association partners, we have OSHI Enhancing HSE and S Culture, IPAF Accredited Training Center, STF, Siri Techno Fabs, Tire Supplier, Trident, Safety Consultancy, Safety Catch Training and Consultancy Private Limited. So I would like heads up everyone that we will have a question and answer after the end of their presentation of our guest speaker. So keep your questions on our comment section, and we will answer them after the speaker's presentation. So before I start, I would like to introduce one of our speakers and moderator, who is Mr. Jason Woods. Jason Woods is the regional manager for IPAF in the Middle East and South Asia. With 30 years of extensive experience in the access industry, he has worked with equipment manufacturers, rental companies, and training bodies. His primary goal is to enhance safety practices while working at height. Jason is dedicated to reducing the risk of accidents and increase safety awareness among management, trainments, and training providers. So, everyone, let us all welcome Jason Woods.
Yep. Thank you, Ali. Good afternoon, everyone, or maybe good morning for some. Certainly, thank you for joining the webinar today. Naturally, our goals are to increase safety awareness and naturally push towards increasing knowledge. Our main focus today is India or South Asia, because we feel that that we do need a big or there is a big gap between using the new equipment in this region, and thankfully that we can set up some awareness sessions like this to hopefully give safety professionals and rental providers an opportunity to understand the safe processes. Naturally, whenever we run webinars, we do invite key speakers and presenters, and today I'm really pleased that Nigel has joined us. Nigel carries so much knowledge in the field, and certainly an expert of health and safety on major mega projects. So no, thank you very much, and a big thank you goes to our sponsors of the event. Again, we all drive safety and walk the same path. So it's important that we have a clear message. But yeah, back to yourself, Ali.
Thank you so much, Jason. So, before I introduce our second speaker, so don't forget to uh, bring out your questions in the comment section, and the speakers will answer them after their presentation and after this, before to end this webinar. So, again, I will welcome our second speaker, who is Nigel Wirtz. Is the EHS Head of Heavy Civil IC at Larsen and Turbo, a chartered member of the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, Nigel brings Nigel brings background with over 22 years in construction safety and 10 years as safety head for mega projects at L&T India. Ooh. His extensive experience also include 15 years of service in British Army where he participated in operational deployments internationally. During his military career, Nigel served in various capacities across armored and airborne units and was a specialty instructor in multiple devices. So again, everyone, let us all welcome Nigel. Hi, Nigel. I think Nigel has froze his screen. Hold on. Let me check with some of the technical difficulties. Well, we all know that live is live and we will encounter a few technical difficulties. So, hold on. Let me double check again if I can bring him back on screen so he can give his welcome remarks as one of our guest speaker for this webinar about equipment, managing your MEWP equipment. So, okay, let's give a second for that. So again, here are few of the key takeaways from today's session. So we will understand the essential of MEWP management, the best practice to ensuring safety in MEWP operation, effective planning strategies for various MEWP operation, training tips, and optimize MEWP usage. So let's see. Okay, let's try. I can see Nigel at the back. Can you give me a thumbs up, sir, before I put you on screen? So, okay. So I think before I put him on screen, let's see who are with us from different parts of the world. So we have from India. Ooh, hi. Hi everyone, welcome. We have from Pakistan as well. Ooh, hi Sir Darren Williams. He's from Emerald. So we also have one from KSA. Hello, welcome to the webinar. And we also have from Kenya. So, yeah. Oh, now I got one from UAE. Welcome, everyone. So we have a different kind of people who is in the parts of the world. We have from Middle East and South Asia. So, hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. One again from Saudi. Ooh, we have a lot from Saudi and India. But yeah, welcome, everyone. So don't forget, get to ready your questions about managing your MEWP equipment, and our guest speakers will answer them in a short while. So I think Mr. Nigel is back. So, hello, sir. Welcome. Okay, I think he's on mute. Let's try unmuting him. Hello, sir. Okay, so I think I have a few technical difficulties with Mr. Nigel, but let me bring Jason back. So, Jason, hi, Jason.
Yeah.
So, I think Mr. Nigel has a little technical difficulties
Welcome
with,
to India, I guess.
yeah,
But
let's
yeah,
welcome.
no, this can be a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
on connections, but I will make a start, and I'm sure Nigel will catch us then once he comes back in. So if
Okay.
you keep an eye out for him, Ali. But
Yes, I will keep it. I'll put him back once I saw him here on the backstage. But yeah, you can head
okay,
over and I'll give you the floors to you.
okay, great. If you can just push the slides forward then for us. So the reason why I chose to put out a webinar for South Asia, or mainly for South Asia, was simply because we come across some major challenges, and I think
Okay.
Nigel is back now.
Yes.
Um,
I'm back again,
and
yes.
well done. So we'll let you do an introduction first, Nigel, and then we'll continue then.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Nigel Wirtz. I'm currently the head of safety for heavy civil L&T. So my background, I'm currently in India, and I'm working for what is in fact the largest construction company in India. And I've been here in India for about 10 years, just over 10 years. But my background is I started my career off as a military man. I served 15 years in the British Army. And then I joined UK Railways, and I worked for UK Railways for a further 15 years. And then I came out to India. So yes, I've been a variety of experiences. With regards to plant and machinery, I've worked on some of the largest contracts in India. So the first one was the construction of a big railway, a 626-kilometre railway in Rajasthan. And we had a lot of construction there in terms of building stations, building railway tracks, and so on. But my last project, which was the bullet train project in Gujarat, we had construction of a 237-kilometre viaduct. And on that particular project, we were using hundreds and hundreds of MEWPs on that project. So I've got a little bit of experience in that. Since then, I've moved to our headquarters in Chennai, where I'm covering all the projects in India. Many of our projects are metro projects, and these are in the city centres. Many of those projects are, they're elevated projects. So we use a lot of MEWPs in the middle of the night, doing construction work. And the benefits for us using these machinery is the fact that we can get in and out during the road blockages at night time, and then get back to work the next day. So that's pretty much our experience on those. And I think I'm looking forward to having a little bit of discussion with Jason with regards to how we can improve things, because as you can imagine, it's a very challenging activity that we do. But look forward to the chat.
Thank you, Mr. Nigel. So I will bring Jason and leave you gentlemen here and take over the webinar. So don't forget, guys, gentlemen, to keep your questions in the comment section, and these gentlemen speakers will answer your question later on.
Okay.
Thanks, Ali. No, as I say, Nigel, it's great to be online with you. I remember drinking the coffee in your office some weeks ago, but no, it's nice to stay in contact for sure. But no, as you mentioned, you have a wealth of knowledge of HSE and related to height safety as well, of using MEWP equipment. But just a few questions, because I believe that, especially in South Asia or India, for an example, where we're seeing a lot of equipment being used on projects, there are gaps, I think, where maybe we are a little lucky, would you say, in terms of having the jobs done, but probably not done in the best possible way, if that makes sense. And a gap between perhaps the operator and the HSE person on site. Would you agree that it becomes a bit of a challenge for you?
Yeah, I think before you go there, I think you have to look at what the alternatives are. Instead of using MEWPs, we previously would be using scaffolds and platforms of various different types to do our work. So the use of mobile elevated work platforms on so many different sites is actually quite a new thing for us. And so, and I think what's happening is that our construction managers are really seeing the value of using this equipment, whereas previously, we would naturally have used, the scaffold equipment and just basically just climbing up onto structures and doing that. So, although there are difficulties with using MEWPs, it's significantly better than what was there before. I think that's something that we have to recognise, in this conversation. But then, when you introduce new technology, machinery, equipment, it comes with, its own headaches. So, yeah, absolutely right. In terms of technology, we're using more and more technology. And I think as we go forward, we're going to use much more technology going, in terms of, improving our ways of doing construction work. So, yeah, absolute benefit for us. But the people who operate the equipment, they have to come along with the times, in terms of understanding, the complexities of this equipment. And I think one of the things that you, particularly here in India, is that if you go back 10 years or more, you will have found that there would be an abundance of workers who were able to do, any kind of work, and they were prepared to do any kind of work at any height at all. What's happening now is that we are, that manpower pool is reducing every single day. We're reducing. We don't have that manpower pool, so we're now having to use mechanical means for doing that. So that means effectively on the construction sites is that suddenly, a whole lot of machinery appears, and we have to have the capability of being able to manage that. So that's one of the reasons why we've had many conversations together, you and I, Jason, because we've struggled to hit the ground running with that particular issue in many cases. However, we have to understand the complexities. We have to understand the problems that we're going to have, and anticipate the type of accidents that you could possibly have, so that we can put the control measures in place to prevent those.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting step, as you say. 4, 5, 6 years ago, scaffolding was number one pretty much in terms of let's get the person up to the height, or even going back further than that. And the scaffolding that you're relating to is bamboo pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah, it used to be.
Steel scaffolding at times.
I mean, one of the things working for L&T is that we've, ever since I've worked for L&T, which is more than 10 years ago, is that we've never allowed bamboo scaffolding to be used. And a large part of it, we use our own scaffolding material. But as I mentioned at the beginning, when you're doing metro kind of projects, you can't have scaffolding in the road when you need to have the road open, in the morning for traffic. So we have really big constraints with regards to installing scaffolding. And if you look at some of our, for example, high-speed railway, the height of the viaduct, in some cases can be up to 20 meters high. We simply can't put scaffolding, that high. And the work that we tend to do on these things tends to be fairly transient. So you need to get the equipment in, get it out, get the guys up there, do the work, and then they need to come down and come out again. If we're doing, for example, bridge construction, we might have our mobile elevated work platforms on barges, so that we can do the underside of the bridges and so on. So we use it for a variety of different ways. And now that we're finding that this equipment is, it's actually quite reliable, we're more keen to use it. We're actually keen to make sure that we have. So if you look at where the equipment comes from, previously what used to happen was a lot of our equipment, in fact, not previously, but still now, is that we have to hire the equipment in. And sometimes the equipment comes in with the operator from the hired agency. In other cases, we have to hire the equipment separately and then give our own operators. And again, that gives us our own challenges. So again, if you look at all the different types of MEWPs that there are, and the different makes of MEWPs and everything else, so typically on a construction site, you might find, 3 or 4 or 5 different makes of equipment, and they've all got their own different quirks as well, their own safety features or even the ways of operating. So, we have what we call a P&M department, a plant and machinery department, and those engineers have to, basically take the machines on board, and then once they're on board, then they have to figure out, exactly how they operate, and then they have to design the methodology for how they make these, how they do the competency for these. That's the challenge for us also.
Yeah, there's some interesting points which you've raised there, I think, Nigel. And if we talk about the machinery, you are right. In India now, we're seeing a lot of different types of MEWPs, where traditionally it was only boom lift machines and no scissor lifts, for an example, which would give you a
Yes.
greater work platform. So it is encouraging to see manufacturers and rental companies now looking outside the scope of a standard boom lift, because obviously applications change. I think we see a lot of truck mount machines now with platforms connected in India, and scissor lifts are growing as vertical lifts. But there's two steps I just want to highlight here, and we'll aim at the operators. When a machine arrives with an operator, my open question is how confident is that, first of all, coming onto your job site, and secondly, operating the machine? Because pretty much we understand that the operators arrive with the unit, with the platform, but how confident is that operator to actually understand health and safety to start with on your project? And secondly, what confidence does he really have on operating the machines?
Yeah, I think there's one thing that, before, when I look at competency in general, here in India, people are very keen to help, to do anything and put their hand to anything, so that's a real credit to the culture in terms of people wanting to, basically do anything. And what you don't want is someone, with a health and safety hat on to say, no, you can't do this, you can't do that, and all the rest of it. So what, my personal philosophy is that we're there to facilitate the work to be done, not to prevent the work from being done at all. So, absolutely, competency is a really important aspect of operating any kind of equipment. So the culture in terms of people willing to basically operate any kind of machinery without a license or a ticket is something that is, it can be a bit hazardous, if you like. So that's a concern. So very often, you might say to someone, are you the operator? And he'll say, yes, I'm the operator. And he's never touched the machine before in his life. So that's that's the concern that we have. So what we have to do is to provide certification, and so therefore the only people who are certified to operate machinery has to be there. So in that perspective, the way that we deal with this is that we bring the equipment on board. It's owned by, as I say, by our plant and machinery department. It's then fully checked by them to make sure that it's serviceable and meets our requirements. And then once it's been given, what we do is we put a green sticker on, and we have a special app that we use. It's called I and it registers the equipment, and also does a full check on the equipment as well. So that's the certification of the equipment, and then the operator themselves, they have to go through a process of demonstrating their capability of using it. So part of that may be some instruction. Particularly, so if you like, if they're used to operating a different type of machinery, there's a transition to be made for that particular type of machine. That has to be there. And then, once you've done all that and you've assessed that the person knows how to operate the machinery properly, then we then start looking at other things. For example, how the induction training in terms of general safety, and then you start looking at specific risk assessment. For example, the work that they may be doing may be quite hazardous. So as I mentioned, if they're working on a barge, for example, they need to have marine safety knowledge, and then obviously how the water will react to the movement of the barge, for example. That might have some effect in terms of risk. If it's a lot of the work we will be doing will be on cross-country areas. So again, if you're moving the vehicles, on rough ground, making sure that you make sure the boom is not fully out when you're driving along, so that when it crosses some uneven ground, it doesn't topple over, and things like that. So it's the general sort of risk awareness of what could go wrong. That's a fundamental aspect of it. And then what you might do as part of that training is to show different types of accidents that have happened in the past. So showing videos of accidents and how things have gone wrong. So again, a lot of the training that you guys do for us is fundamental for us, and what you do. So what we will tend to do is to have this kind of induction training done by ourselves, and then IPAF come in and then they certify the operators themselves, as you have done on our sites.
Yeah.
But what doesn't happen usually, and which it should do in some respects, is for the two to happen at the same time. Very often we'll have an operator that's been operating for a month or two, and then he has the IPAF training. Ideally it should happen at the beginning, but that's the circumstance. So what is particularly different here in India is the concept of certification. So we will describe someone as competent who has gone through our own assessment, but they won't be certified, and that's the difference. That's the big difference.
Yeah, but you've raised a good point there, Nigel, in terms of the operator being willing to learn, and I think that is a big step. And I've been back and forth India for quite some time now, and it is different to other countries for sure. But having the operator to be willing to be trained and coached, I think that is a big step, because sometimes these guys are going into the unknown, where they arrive on a mega project and now have to operate machinery and certainly raise platforms to height, and that does take some skill. But it doesn't happen overnight, like you say. It's consistent of training on a regular basis, I think. And it's about helping the operator operate, I think, so that training doesn't stop then, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big challenges that we have is communication, and as you can imagine, in India we have many different languages that go on, from site to site, from location to location. So very rarely would the operators speak English. That's one issue that we would have. They would either speak Hindi or some other language. So if you go to the south of India, the majority of the workers there will maybe not speak Hindi, they will maybe only speak Tamil or some other language. So again, the communication is the issue. And when you're looking at training, the training that you give is very hands-on. Compared to you're not really talking classroom work, to a large extent. And certainly, what you have done on our sites is that yes, you give a classroom training session, but a lot of the training is visual, and then the hands-on stuff goes on using our own equipment as well. So that's key for us.
Yeah, I think it has to be that balance, though, Nigel. To be honest with you, because it has to be an element of classroom, but then it's kind of doubled up then on the practical session, and it's not straight testing. It's about education, what the emergency descent looks like, for an example. Warranty inspections, basic ones, which you would do on a tire or a wheel, this kind of thing. So, one kind of mirrors each other, but you're right, it's not all academic training. It's a lot of hands-on of lifting the platform and driving the equipment, from repositioning the platforms from A to B and things like that. Nigel, just something that always comes and approaches me every time I come to India is that we have a tendency of seeing the age of machine doesn't reflect the data plate. What's your view on this, where we see data plate changes of the age of machine?
Yeah. Okay, so again, that depends on company to company, I would imagine, and I don't know. I can't speak for other companies, and I certainly can't speak for the suppliers. But what does happen is certainly L&T, my company, we have what we call an age bar system. So whether it's a crane, whether it's a MEWP, whether it's any kind of machinery, we have an age bar criteria. And that criteria is based on our understanding of what you'd expect for wear and tear for these vehicles or these machines. So yeah, very often our so the P&M department, when they hire this equipment in, they will specify that this can only be a certain age, and if it goes beyond that age, then we will not hire it. So I could imagine that, yes, if you're a supplier, there will be an intention maybe to make the machine younger than what it was. The other aspect of it is, and I don't think it's such an issue with MEWPs, but we certainly have an issue with cranes, where cranes are imported from other countries, and basically what happens when cranes are imported from another country, if it's a second-hand crane, it's reborn, so
Yeah.
so the age of that crane is very often the day that it was registered in the country.
Yeah.
So that could be a discrepancy that we see. Yeah.
I understand that, in one hand, the age of machine is very important, because generally, if it's an older machine, then it needs more attention from maintenance then, and parts may be restricted. So I do understand when you see companies issuing, let's say that we won't accept anything 15 years or over. So that, we have to think about this, because anything a bit older perhaps needs a bit more attention, and it's hard to get that balance then, because we're walking a fine line, I think, of equipment being supplied which isn't fit for purpose, and that's the danger, I think.
Yeah, I mean, what we do is we do go through a process of evaluating the equipment before we take it on, and I suppose the age bar criteria is there because we make the assumption that the equipment has not been maintained in the way that perhaps it should have done in terms of routine maintenance and so on. So that is there. I think as the industry or the use of MEWPs increases across the country, I think it's probably a good chance that the maintenance of this equipment will be better. And I think historically, people have tended to purchase this kind of equipment for the duration of a project, and they've not really looked at sort of maintaining this equipment for the long term. So that's something that will change, because companies have to be more competitive. They have to make sure that the longevity of this equipment. And if you're a hire company, it doesn't make any sense at all to allow your equipment to be used and abused and damaged. Not at all. You should maintain it.
Yeah, I would agree. My background is MEWP rental back in the UK all these years ago, and the work from workshops, which was done, was phenomenal. Every step of that machine coming back in from being out on rent, they would have different bays and zones where it would be, a first checklist, then it would be minor inspections and things like that. So it is very important, and that's what keeps the machine moving then, I think, for the job site.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think where we can improve on this is preventative maintenance rather than just simply maintenance when things go wrong. That's something that can improve. Yeah.
Which then opens another door of availability of parts as well. I don't know how much of the spares are available straight away. As I know, a lot of your projects are kind of in the countryside, where we see that you could be a million miles away from a city kind of thing. So getting that repairs then to the project is quite challenging then.
Yeah.
So it kind of gives us
and also the equipment goes from site to site. So you might have one owner for a month or so, and then it'll move to another owner. So yeah, this stuff does get passed around, from and the way that individuals treat those is different, in each different site.
Yeah. And see, when you talk about machine movement like that, the owner is meant to re-register the machine with the manufacturer. So if there's any safety alerts or bulletins to come out, then the owner of that machine then would share that naturally to wherever the machine is being used. That's what's meant to happen. It's like when you sell a car, that you then re-register it. as a new owner then. So I think this gives us an overview and understanding of where we are in India. Ali, can you just take us to the next slide a minute? So I think that what we have now is a typical industry, or let's call it construction site, but the usage of MEWPs, I think. And I think some of this, Nigel, you've already highlighted, is the different types of platforms. As we can see on the screen, that we're going from static booms to standard scissor lifts. Then we've got articulated booms as well as straight booms. And, you know, the dynamics of platform movement changes dramatically, I think. So, you know, when we're looking at projects like this, and I guess for the projects that you have run, you don't just use one type of machine. I think that you would use quite a few different design of lifts, I think.
Yeah, it depends on the location, and it depends on the reach that we're trying to get to. You know, obviously for the larger sites, you know, where we're doing, for example, up to 20 meters, you know, you are using, you know, telescopic boom lifts, that kind of thing, where you're trying to get as far as you possibly can. But yeah, the variety of work that we have means that, so for example, if you are in the city centre doing a metro, a viaduct in a metro, you're really limited for space. So the footprint of the machine on the ground is also really important for us, because, you know, even having you know, a large machine with outriggers that stick out for a metre or two, that's potentially going to basically block the whole traffic. So that's a big issue for us. But yeah, you know, we use scissor lifts, we use vertical lifts, we use you know, push around lifts, all various different types. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's good. And to, like you say, that the image there gives different types of platforms that are available. So Ali, if you can take us to the next slide, because now we talk about the fun stuff. They're pretty much, you know, when things go wrong. So I don't even know where to start with this. You know, there's a lot of bypassing. There's a lot of, you know, creating new initiatives for these machines. As you can see on the bottom right, we're talking about wiring being kind of misled and allowing the machines to overreach and creating a tipping factor. And some of the other stuff there, which you can see that the operators are generally unsafe by having accessories. We call them foreign components.
Yeah.
Really, a component should be tested by a manufacturer. Generally, once we add a component, a foreign component, it can affect the safe working load, the wind speed, the side load for sure, and it kind of creates a sale, I think, when the operators are elevated. We still have a bit of a headache, Nigel, of operator at the ground on these platforms. In hindsight, we always say that unless it's special cases and the machine is designed for ground controls, then all operational should be from the platform with the operator, not from the ground.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, this is the challenge that we face, and that challenge is on the basis that we employ workers who do the work and operators who operate the machinery. So the operator is very rarely going to be in the basket doing the operating from there, and that is an issue. The other point which you're raising here is with regards to sort of the DIY you know, tendency that exists. Here in India, they have a term called jugaad, and jugaad is like your DIY. And in some respects, it's an innovation. They're trying to find a solution to a particular problem. They're trying to find some way of fixing that particular problem. And to a large extent, you know, I think it's very admirable that you know, people are trying to find, they're interested to find a solution to whatever problem that they're dealing with. And what I do on our projects is I encourage people to come up with innovations, but it has to be sanctioned by, you know, proper qualified engineers who can then check it to make sure that it's done. So what we tend to have is people at the much more less qualified or trained level of finding solutions. And very often, they take great pride in that. And I think, so it's hard to discourage that kind of activity. And therefore, you have to take a judgment to say, well, look, are you trying to solve a problem, or are you trying to create a problem? And this is where the risk management comes into it, because you have to say, well, look, if you do what you're doing, you are actually going to create a hazard. You're going to actually create a situation where someone's going to be seriously harmed. And so therefore, you need to have a very calm discussion to say, look, I appreciate what you're doing, but actually this is not quite what we want you to achieve.
Yeah.
So to summarize, I don't want to discourage people being innovative, but I do want people to be discouraged from doing things that are likely to increase the risk. That's my point.
Yeah, no, I get it. And to be fair, we could walk around sites in the Middle East as well, and we would see a similar scenario where in the summer months it gets very hot, so the operator creates a canopy to stop the sun being direct whilst they're working at height. There's a lot of accessory add-ons, but the key is, as you mentioned, is when does that add-on become a risk? And if that's the case, then that's what we need to consider, I think. The other one which I would highlight is we're in safety harnesses in vertical machines. Some projects will insist and some do not insist, because as it's a vertical lift. The issue which you harness on a vertical is that you may restrict vision from the operator as they trying to maneuver their machine around, and the bigger the platform, the harder the risk is.
I think I can give you a response to that, and I've got two opinions on this. On the one opinion is, PPE is mandatory. You must wear PPE. You must, if there's a risk of falling, you must wear a safety harness. One of the challenges that we have in L&T is that if you come to heavy civil, and you've been to my sites many times, and you probably don't know, but we employ 100,000 workers across the whole of our business. In addition to that, we have another 7,000 staff who work for us. So we're huge, and our policy with regarding PPE is that we have a one size fits all. And I think when you were on my project some time ago, you put on one of our harnesses, and our harnesses are built for strength. They're quite difficult to put on. They're not something that you can put on quickly. And so therefore, if you are simply getting into a MEWP, going up to the viaduct, to spend 5 minutes putting your harness on and then taking it off and so on, is quite a bit of a challenge, actually. So, particularly if you have visitors who come to visit your sites, they want to come up and you're saying, look, we have to adjust the straps and so on. So I have an issue with the PPE that we currently use related to this. And there are many different types of PPE that you can use in terms of harnesses and things. And when you're using MEWPs, you should have something that's easy to put on and easy to take off. And that's so in this particular case, one of the things I'm trying to encourage is that we have a specific MEWP PPE, that you can wear over the top of your existing PPE. So that's something that we could do. But again, when you have 100,000 workers and hundreds of these machines, just to make that change is quite challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine, definitely. Ali, if you can take us on to the next slide, please. And as you know, Nigel, just another few snaps, shots of the challenges what you face, I guess. And when we look at the one type of platforms, obviously we've got when you look closely on the platform, it's kind of not the correct size guardrail or handrail and things like that. The issues which we have is the risk of fall, of course, because if we have a hard handrail or a platform handrail that's not complete, then naturally the risk of fall becomes higher, especially as we're elevated. And it's thinking about the platform movement, I think, is key to make sure that
Yes.
they're able to reach where you want them to reach is the important field there, I think.
Yeah, if you look at the full assessment of, and this is where, as an organisation, you could be working in silos. So the guy who's the P&M guy might be responsible for the equipment, and then you might have the project manager who's somewhere else, and then the worker's doing something completely different. And here you have to have equipment that is fit for purpose. So, the handrails have to be correct. And what will happen is that some safety guy will say, look, there's no handrails. You need to put some handrails. And he might not have the correct specification for those. And then somebody will come along and say, okay, we'll just do something. And then they'll just weld these things on. The other point is with regards to these platforms, is that you might be using them for other purposes. For example, you may not just transporting people, but you actually might be transporting materials as well. So having these MEWPs that are fit for purpose, what is the intention that you intend to use these for? What's the kind of weight limits that you're intending to lift with these? And so one of the things we do insist on is that they put the weight limit written on the signboard on the side of each of these MEWPs, so that you know exactly what they should be lifting. But that's fine if you know what the weights that you're actually lifting. So some of this equipment that you're lifting could be 50, 100 kgs and or more. So are you using this equipment for the right purpose? If it's not, if this equipment isn't suitable, then you should be having something else. But the tendency will be is to just use it.
Yeah, but again, that takes us back to equipment availability as well, doesn't it? Because perhaps the machine which we really need is nowhere to be seen. So there is an element of that as well, I think.
Yeah. Or is it easier to use? Is it easier to use the MEWP for something than using the scaffold ladder or some other way to get up?
Yeah. Ali, if you can take us to the next slide. So now we generally look at measuring the gaps. I think we've covered a lot of this, in fairness, Nigel, but I think the major gaps, what we will see is the starting point, I guess. And at the back of my mind, I'm thinking about knowledge of the equipment and what it does. And I think that what I generally see, whether we talk about South Asia, Middle East, procurement doesn't know enough about the equipment that is needed to be worked on site. And do you find that can be a challenge?
Yeah, as I mentioned, you might be working in silos. So yeah, absolutely. So unless are people talking to the workers on the ground? Are the site teams actually feeding back on if you look at the PDCA cycle, the plan, do, check and act process requires you to go through that process of evaluating how you've delivered that work. And I think sometimes on many sites that's not the case. That they don't go through that process to see what's gone well and what's not gone well. So the procurement may never know. They'll never know. Maybe all they know is the cost of this stuff.
Yeah, and that's generally the case, I think. And when we switch then to the HSE person on site, I think as a HSE person, we're meant to know everything. But even that alone is very challenging. It takes years of experience, I think, and knowledge on the ground to totally understand. I know we all do a HSE qualification, but that doesn't tick all the boxes, does it? Sometimes we have to be specific in certain areas, I think.
Yeah, and having a particular interest in certain types of work. Sometimes, and how have you been taught? One of the things I find on many of our sites is that when people are taught just loads and loads of information, it turns people off. If it's taught in a very practical way, people are more interested. So, and if you can feed back and actually make some change, then people are much more likely to be bought into this. So I think the knowledge, the lack of knowledge, I think it's improving. I would say that going back a few years ago, that would have been a big problem. I think that's becoming less of a problem now, and I think we're using the way we're teaching now is better because we're now using much more of digitalization. By using
Yeah.
video clips and animation and other things. We're even using things like virtual reality and stuff like this. So the way we teach is much better, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. When you talk about digital apps and things like this, we can move documents so quickly now from one side of India to the other, within seconds, pretty much. So I would agree that digitalization is really picking up quite fast. One thing
Well,
I
we're
would
now,
like.
but just to finish that, just to give an example of something that we're currently working on at the moment, is that we're now putting QR codes on everything, and these QR codes is basically the instructions on how to do stuff. So what happens is that you're in a better position to turn around and when you're challenging someone who doesn't know what they're doing, or they're doing something incorrectly, you can go straight to the document that is actually on the construction site by simply showing the QR code of that
Yeah,
document. And or whether it's a risk assessment or whether it's an assessment of something, whatever the document happens to be, you can just slap a QR code on the side of the vehicle or the machinery, and then they have no excuse for not knowing what it is that they should know. So that's
yeah.
something that should help. That should help as well.
If I go back into the days of in the rental business, and the amount of machines that used to turn up with no instruction manual, or it'll stay in the office whilst the machine is on site because they have to return it with the machine. Those challenges was really tough in them days. um, Nigel, another thing which I would like to highlight is other focus. Do you find that if we know we've got to work at height, we just focus on the job at height rather than how we get there? Do you feel that there's a bit of that there as well?
Often, and again, this is something in terms of education that we're trying to do. If you go through the hierarchy of controls, you should be avoiding working heights in the first place. So, how can we avoid it? And I think there's a lot of work being done at the moment with, in terms of design, to make sure that there's the minimal amount of working at heights is being done. But then, if you look at access, there is an issue there, and the point with this is that somehow the designers very often, imagine that the people fly to the site of where they're going to do the work, and suddenly people are not part of the equation. One of the things that we're looking to do is to introduce the thing called BIM, which is the basically visualization systems communication to communicate the design for this. So basically what you do is you create a visualization of how a structure is actually going to be constructed. And what you do with that is you actually introduce your safety measures for that. So if you, for example, are going to use a MEWP, it would be something that would be introduced at stage number 3, and it'll be used from stage number 3 to stage number 5, and it'll show you exactly how you'd operate it. So things like where, if you look at, for example, metros, where you position your MEWP is vital, because you've got traffic management that's going on around it, and you have to design your traffic management. So once you put your outriggers out, you need to put your protection of that machine around that, and that has to be designed. So part of the planning has to include this. But previously, you're right. The situation was that you would suddenly magic your people up onto the onto working at heights. Yeah, absolutely.
And fairness, I think that's always been the case wherever we work, I think. But it's good to see that the thought of how we get there is now coming in at an early stage, I think. And one gap which I can see is, as project moves from one phase to another, then the type of equipment change, but the rescue plan stays the same, kind of thing. So I'm not sure whether we see a lot of, we need to revisit something as we go to phase 2. Maybe the roof goes on, for an example. So our access is now slightly different to phase one.
Yeah, I'll give you an example of something that is of a concern of me, that I have a concern of. And this is where, let's say, for example, you are currently in a MEWP and you're going to move from the MEWP onto the structure. So let's say it's a viaduct pier, for example. Okay, so you've attached yourself with your safety belt inside the basket of your MEWP, and you're now going to step out of your MEWP onto the structure. So my question is, where are you going to attach your safety belt once you've got off, assuming that you're on a precarious location once you've gone up to that location? So what we're now looking to do is to make sure that the designers have actually designed the location where your safety belt will be attached. That's a good example of something that is a concern.
So it becomes a landing bay. Yeah.
Yeah. So the landing bay has to be designed with the proper locations of where you can put your feet and where you're actually going to store your materials and where you're going to attach yourself as well. Yeah.
Nigel, I can feel our audience cringing with the thought of stepping out of the platform. But in fairness, we've got to think of all applications. There may be times when an operator has to step out. So that then reflects back to risk assessment. And like you say, that you're now creating a landing bay. And that is different to just stepping out on a rooftop, for an example.
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about a rooftop, but I'm talking about onto a.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but obviously through safe access and egress, really a MEWP is designed to give you that. It's not designed to remove people from height, but when you do have applications which is different to the norm, then naturally, like what you're doing, you're pushing forward in terms of landing bays, and you hook on before you hook out, kind of thing. There are some accessories available. I'm not sure if they're in India, mind, where you can have a connection onto the handrail. So it kind of creates like a line where you would clip your carabiner, and then it would allow you then to walk out or step out into a guarded area. So there are accessories available, but you would just need to speak to the manufacturers and see what is actually there in India, for an example.
Yeah, the belts that we issue have 2 lanyards, so you can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Ali, if you can push on to the next slide. So some of these slides, Nigel, we've already discussed a lot of the safety aspects. Documentation. What is a typical documentation for somebody to operate a MEWP on a job site? So you mentioned training for sure. There was 2 parts. One was your plant and maintenance department.
Yeah. So what they will issue is they'll issue a certificate, which gives them the authorization of what they can and can't operate, basically. So they'll have done an assessment of the individual. So if you look at the process that an operator will go through, he'll go through normal screening, which will then cover the medical and all those sort of things. Then the qualifications, they'll check all the qualifications and stuff, and then he will then go down to the plant machinery department, and then he'll be introduced to the machinery, and then he'll have to answer some questions about that particular that activity, and then he'll be shown the equipment, and then he'll be tested on how to operate it and so on. Once he's proven to be competent of using the equipment, he will then be given a certificate, which is then signed by the plant and machinery department, safety department, and also the quality department also.
And what about login inspections? Is there a process for login inspections each day, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so what they do is they'll do a pre-start check. So if you look at each of the equipment that we have, each of the machines that we have, whether it's a crane or whether it's a MEWP or anything else, there's a checklist that they go through, and they check all the different aspects of it in terms of mechanical and so on, and all the safety features. So, for example, if it has an ASLI fitted, he'd have to check to make sure that it's operating and working, and then he'd have to tick it. And then what happens then is that the P&M in charge and the safety guys will both have to sign to say that he's done that.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense for sure. Ali, if you can go on to the next slide, but I think we can jump through this, Nigel, because we've already spoken about the planning aspect. And And naturally under planning, we'd be looking at procurement, safety department, communication, that kind of thing. So if I'm a training provider and I'm in India and I'm going to come to your projects to do some teaching, what would you expect from the training provider? What is accepted?
I think basically starting off with an overview of the risks associated to use of MEWPs. I might look at having some sort of examples of accidents that have happened on other projects or other sites. Looking at sort of what types of injuries you might have. So, for example, you mentioned falls from heights, things like struck by injuries, maybe machinery that tips over, crushing injuries. Looking at things like electrical shocks, maybe from working with overhead power lines and this kind of thing. What do you do in terms of equipment failure? That kind of stuff. So basically an outline of what types of injuries you'd have. And then I'd expect sort of a detailed set of SOPs of what you would do. What are the standard operating procedures that you would have in terms of operating the equipment. So that would cover, probably, it depends on where the work was being done, where the training was being done. But I want it to be fairly specific to the type of equipment that's being used. So if it's being used in the city and they're operating the equipment through the streets, so on, how they manage the traffic and how they manage the other aspects of it. If it's in the countryside, how would they operate it in the countryside in terms of rough roads and so on? And if it's inside a building, again, how would you operate it inside a building and manage it like that?
Yeah, and again, you're highlighting some key aspects of MEWP management, and I think it's where there is a gap between a training provider and a client or contractor, because very rarely you'll find that the training center, the supplier of training, actually communicates with the project activity. So I will teach you one way today, and tomorrow you will work totally different. So I think what you've just highlighted there would certainly make sense, I think.
I mean, there was the last time I sat through your training, I remember you mentioning one particular type of accident. It was where somebody wasn't hooked into the basket, and suddenly the machine was operating forwards, and then it hit a bump or something, and somebody fell out of it. That was a good example of something that I'd never seen before. I'd never even heard of it.
Yeah, I think we have a short clip. Ali, I don't know if you can just push on to the video, but yeah, you're right, Nigel. And do you see, and I see this a lot, where it's not about the height, it's actually the activity more than the height. This could be 2 meters elevated, but the same activity. Can we press play? Yeah. So yeah, you're right, Nigel. And like I say, you look at the activity of the operator, he's good vision for moving the machine, but because he doesn't have the right PPE on, it naturally creates another hazard. It's not about height, it's about movement of platform of machine. And it's the final wheels which will catapult him out. There's two things to look at there, Nigel. One, that he doesn't have PPE on, naturally he's coming out. And two, if the lanyards of the safety belts, as we call it in India, is too long. And if it's 1.8 to 2 meters long, and is clipped onto the handrail, then we have a position where the person is hanging. And then we've got to think of another rescue plan.
Well, that just shows how effective your training is, because I remember that from more than a year ago.
Yeah, and I'm sure the audience is thinking that, I did give you heads up on this to say this, but no, it's a true fact.
I saw this. It was more than a year ago, maybe even maybe 1.5 years ago, I think, maybe.
Wow. But no, and again, Nigel, it's a serious thing, and you've highlighted this about movement of platforms. If you've got to drive it from one place to another, even though we say that the machines are not designed to drive in long distance, but in some cases we have to drive it from one place to another. But we've just got to be aware of the risks and hazards, and a small unevenness of the ground could be enough to catapult the operator out. So that this is a big takeaway, I think, of, you know, always wear the correct PPE for sure. Ali, if you can take us to the next slide. And this gives us another example, Nigel, of different types of, the harness is full body for sure, but it's the lanyard that sometimes need to change. So if we have a very large platform, then perhaps a retractable block system and an SRL would be better than a standard lanyard. It allows the operator to have better vision around the platform than the traditional lanyard that he would clip in and create a blind spot. So it's about planning, I think, and making sure that we have the right equipment for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you were saying earlier, you know, if you're using a block of, you know, a harness attack, you're going to wear a harness anyway if you're working up at height. So yes, it's easier to clip in and clip out, much easier.
Yeah, yeah. If you can go to the next slide, Ali. And this is just a final slide about the actual harnesses. And as we can see, there's different types of harnesses. So if I use the example of 1-point harness to 5-point harness, so what that means, it gives you different work positions if you're working at heights and doing different activities. And as you can see, in terms of the lanyards and the carabiners, that they're all different again. So everything clips together and fits for the job that you're doing. That's the big takeaway there, I think. And as you mentioned, Nigel, for MEWP activity, you feel that you should have something which is fairly usable quite quickly so that the guys then can use the right kit and minimize the risk of coming out to the platform, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, Ali, if you can take us to the next slide. And just one thing I would like to highlight, Nigel, you spoke about inspections, and even from our side of it, we've changed a lot over the last few years. Traditionally, and if you go to the next slide, traditionally we always emphasize this pre-use inspection. The idea is that you will catch something wrong before you start elevating the bodies at heights. So, you know, it could be 15 meters high and you realize that one of the cylinders is leaking. So pre-use inspection is massive. And if we focused on the emergency controls, by testing them and checking at the ground, you know then that if you need them, they're going to work. Because if you're talking of bringing out a platform into neutral position at 20, 25 meters high, that takes some time. And we're assuming the operators are fit and healthy. If there's an injury, then it becomes a severe timing. So pre-use inspection, like I say, it's massive in our game. If you can go to the next slide, Ali, because traditionally we would always have a manual form, and this is what the manual form pretty much looks like. It will be divided in a few areas. One is visual checks and one is function checks. So this document is pretty straightforward, from documentation down to physically checking the wheels on both sides of the tire wall, into the treads, are they connected to the wheel hubs and so on. So it's A to Z, Nigel. The good thing about this now, you spoke about your app as L&T. We have an app called EPAL, and within EPAL, the operator's logbook is digital, and so is the inspection. So if I'm one of your contractors on site, I can fill this out within minutes, and then send the report then to your lead, whoever accepts the reports. Whether the report is good or bad, I can still send you the report, so you could have it within minutes then.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with this kind of system is not allowing it to be a tick list. You know, if it's just a tick box, then workers or operators will tend to just tick and very often tick the wrong boxes. Having a system where you can digitally record a fault or a problem that goes directly to the person who's got to fix it is vital. We have a system for that for general safety issues, but at the moment we don't have it for plant faults, and that's something that we need to be working on. Yeah, absolutely. So your system that you have, I think, sounds like the right thing.
When I get back to India, I'll come and see you, Nigel, and I'll show you, I'll demonstrate how it works. But it's key, and like you say, it could be a minor fault, but still it's a fault. So I could send that to your plant and maintenance crew, and within the next day, then we could have a mechanic on site. So, there is, it's not just for safety, it's actually to help the logistics of the machines and get productivity, or keep productivity moving. But yeah, I will go through this with you next time I'm across. So Ali, if you can take us to the next one. And that, I think, is us pretty much over.
Yep, that sums up the webinar. So I'll read few questions. So I got here a few questions for both of you, but yep. So here's one. So, hi Jason, hi Nigel. How are you planning on working with local legislators in South Asia in getting the operation of MEWPs from ground controls and floor level to put workers in place, rather than training the tradesman to be qualified operative or MEWP operator, thus making overall operations safer, mitigating entrapment, etc. This one is from Daryl Williams.
Yeah, hi Darren. Hope you're well. Do you want me to take this one, Nigel, or part of it?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I had a feeling that this question would come. At least the ground controls are a big headache for us, for simply reason that it increases the risk of entrapment. So the term of crushing the tradesman is now become high risk. What I would say is that we need to look at and identify a plan where we can switch it so that the tradesman operates the equipment. The training shouldn't be too much of a headache, simply because if we talk about scissor lifts, there's maybe half a dozen controls in the platform. Obviously, if once they go to a bigger scissor lift, then naturally some of the controls will increase. But I think that the real takeaway is that we must remember that ground controls are designed for emergency descent and function check-in on your pre-use inspection. The controls at the ground are not proportional, they are direct. So when I click it to go up, it goes up at the same speed as it comes down. Whereas in the platform, I have the ability to reduce that speed, especially when I'm getting close to an area, call it a confined space at height. So I think that, as an industry sector, this is a big drive, I think, Nigel. And I think that they will take some time. There is another turn to this as well, because if we are supplying operators, then I think we should be more than an operator, and we should have receive training for pre-delivery inspection. So that would mean then, Nigel, that the operator would have the ability to check the oil, for an example, and if it's changing color, identify that there's contamination, this kind of thing. So there's two rules there, I think. One is, let's try and move the operator into the platform where it becomes safer to use the equipment. But also, if we're going to rely on an operator to come to the site, then he should have more knowledge, I think, than just standard operating the equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're operating the equipment from ground level, and you've got somebody in.
Hi.
You still there?
Yes,
yep.
You're still there.
Sorry, if you're trying to operate the machinery from the basket, and you're trying to communicate with somebody who's at ground level who's operating your equipment, that's really difficult. You're either using a walkie-talkie or hand signals or a mobile phone. It's extremely challenging to do that, and you need to be working together to really understand that. I have a serious concern sometimes when I'm watching the MEWP activities going on, and you think, if the guy who's at ground level, he operates too quickly or too fast, someone's going to be injured, by being struck in the head or something from the underside of a building or so on. So yeah, there is a big issue with that. With regards to legislation and how we can improve that, it's not something I've personally been involved in, but certainly I would if that opportunity was there to discuss this in a forum, discussing it with legislators, then definitely I would have my twopence to give on that one.
Excellent.
Okay. So I think the next question will be for Jason. So is there a drive for IPAF mandatory compliance and certification in South Asia? Again, this is from Darren.
Darren again. The answer is
Yeah.
yes. That we've been in India for a long time now. Are we seeing an increase every 12 months? Yes, we are. Again, it's been challenging. We're increasing the equipment, but we're not covering the amount of training against the number of equipments, if that makes sense. So there are frustrations, like we had frustrations in the Middle East over the years. We're now in the Middle East getting to a point where it's now getting more and more accepted. There's two sides of this. I think that the contractors are now reaching out more for professional training rather than localized training, because we're understanding that there's a risk element of safety and productivity, and we're at that stage where we're getting that balance, I think. So I would say to Darren, yes, there is a big drive, and we're getting more training centres on board now in India, which is helping. And surely within a few, whether it becomes 6 months to 24 months, I would say that we'll see an increase. Currently, we're teaching around 900 students a year currently in India. So that gives you an idea, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Okay, so here are our last question. So this is a question for both of you. So who can do the inspection? And a follow-up question from that is, in India, factory inspection do the inspection of every product whenever it has knowledge about the product or not? So who do really the inspection? Is it the factory or um, the third party who is reselling it? I think this question is depend. I think the question refer here is, I think, the MEWP itself.
Yeah, well, the first thing to outline is an inspector should inspect the equipment. So if you're an inspector, then you should be trained to inspect the equipment. The disadvantage that we see is that the inspectors are not trained to start off with. So you could approach a truck mount machine and they've never seen it themselves to start off with. So that becomes a question. I would say the owner of the equipment is responsible to inspect or have an inspection on their equipment as well, whether it's a factory or a construction project or company, or whether it's a rental company. They should be responsible, and it would be in their interests anyway, because they would get better utilization out of that product as well, for sure.
Just my response to that is, with regards to inspections, is that you're absolutely right, Jason. You need to have a competent inspector to inspect things, and this is why very often we're using checklists, because there may be some doubt that the items that are being checked, the individual will actually know what to check. So we use checklists. But what I find with safety people in particular is that I have to make sure that those safety people understand what it is that the operator also knows, to check that he's doing that. So what we have is, we have a system of the operator doing his own inspections of the equipment, and then someone else checking to make sure that he's done it also. But very often it's simply a check to make sure that he's done it. Whether he's done it correctly or not, that's an issue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
as per answer, a manufacturer can do the inspection. But
Yeah.
and I think there is one from the comment section answer this question. So this is one who answered the question. I think you can back up this answer from the previous question about inspection. So this is from Sumish. VASU. So I think it has to be done by an OEM trained person who knows how to carry out PDI properly and let the owner or a third party inspector do it. So I think you both can back up the answer that Sumish gave from a previous question about inspection.
Yeah, I would agree, and like we've said, that the inspector should be trained and competent to inspect that equipment for sure. Now, if that inspector's taken out some OEM training, then of course that's going to help his knowledge on the equipment that he's inspecting. But the gap which we do see is that the inspector doesn't know enough about the products. And for Nigel's example, his plant and maintenance department would know far more about the equipment that they're using than the third-party inspector. It's a bit like the tail wagging the dog, I think.
Yeah. So I think you gentlemen wants to answer this question. This is the last question that I get here from the comment section. So lifting a pipe on basket is allowed to lift. So
That's $1 million question.
wait. You can. I got an answer from Darren Williams. Do you want me to read his answer before you gentlemen reply
We'll have
something with it?
we'll have to keep an eye
Yeah,
on
go
the
on.
time. Oh,
Okay, so Darren will. This is the last one. So Darren answered that question about, has the manufacturer of MEWP, the basket, the machine has been designed for the job? Is it fitted with a lifting frame? There are so many presentations. It has to be the right tool, right equipment for the job. So, can you gentlemen back
there
up the
are
answer?
accessories. Darren's right. There are accessories for platforms, but in hindsight, we don't see the accessories on site because it goes all the way back to the beginning of the planning for the job and taking it to the next phase. If Mohammed is talking about just lifting pipe generally on the side, hooked on with some cable ties, then no, it needs to be the right accessory and to make sure it's secure for sure.
So, sometimes,
I
yeah.
think
If I'm
just to give you some clarity on that, the response there is that the mobile elevated work platforms are designed to carry people, and that's the general use that we use those. However, they are used occasionally to move equipment as well. So if you are very clear about the amount of weight that can be lifted by the MEWP, and the MEWP can lift a certain amount of tools or equipment within that. So, for example, if you've got, let's say, for example, the capacity of lifting 300 kilos in your basket, and you're using one person in the basket, you can maybe carry 200 kilos in there. However, that should be not the norm. That should be, you're not using it as a crane. You should be using other equipment to do this kind of work. So I think the idea that you're using it as a crane is not correct.
Yeah, because sometimes most of the people just lift pipes through basket, and those pipes are just chained, and they just like lift it up using, I think those are lifters.
Yeah, it's
But
quite an open question, Ali, I think, and it
yeah,
depends how we look at it, I think, and analyze what the question is. Is the
and
pipe
How
safe?
depend.
big is the pipe? How much does the pipe weigh? What's the length of the pipe? What's the
Yeah.
there's a whole risk assessment required here.
And I think
Yeah,
we really know what or where is the work being done. So
Correct.
it's a board.
What
It's
are
a
the
board.
what are the weather conditions? What are the surrounding conditions? What are there's a thousand factors that we need to consider
So
with this.
I think there's
And
already a planning here on about this question.
but one of the things I said at the very beginning is that as a safety professional, your job is not to say no to every single thing that could be risky. The answer is that you have to put a plan in place that is based on conducting risk assessment and feasibility to see whether or not there be any kind of hazard as a result of it. And if the answer is, very, very minimal, then maybe you can go ahead with it. But it depends on the situation.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, I'd agree.
So can I ask Jason and Nigel, would you like to answer two more questions, or we can sum it up and
Yeah,
close
no,
this webinar?
I'm happy to answer more questions.
Okay. So I got one question for you, Nigel. So, hi, Nigel. Now the project site has gone more digital. IPAF cards can be verified through mobile apps. We are encouraging use of mobile phones like scanning QR codes and seeking information. How do we ensure and manage the balance between its proper usage and avoid distraction, especially with workers? What can we do from health and safety point of view? Thank you. So I think Jason can also answer this one, but it's more of a discipline on how do you use your mobile phone using your during work times.
Okay. Okay. My first response regarding mobile phones is, and this is what I say to our people. We have in L&T, we have what we call golden safety rules. And one of the golden safety rules is surrounding mobile phones. So if I give any training related to mobile phones, I ask the question is, on a construction site, where are you allowed to use your mobile phone? And the answer is very simple. You can use your mobile phone in a position of safety. That's it. So that means you're not walking around using your mobile phone. You haven't got your mobile phone to your ear while you're wandering around with plant and machinery that's operating in that site. Okay, so you have to be in a position of safety. So that's the first thing. So yes, you can use your mobile phone to communicate because that's required there, and you can also use the mobile phone to use apps and various other things, so long as you're in a position of safety. What we do find with apps is that, or with the mobile phone, is that you're carrying less documents and other things around with you. So it's a very convenient tool for us to use. And if you're communicating problems on a site, you can take a photo very quickly and then you can communicate that by WhatsApp or some other system very easily. So I'm a big fan of digitalization on the construction sites. I'm also very keen about being able to communicate the problem or the solution to a problem very, very quickly to as many people as you need to. So that's my personal feeling with that. But the phone must be used from a position of safety.
It's a very good answer, actually, Nigel, and it certainly eliminates a lot of the misuse of mobile phones, I think, on projects. If I can just add on about the IPAF qualification, or EPAL, as we call it now, the good thing about it is if the license is not available through EPAL, it means that it's a false license. So in terms of verifying that the license, it's very quickly you can find this. But it's like Nigel has just said, it's using the phone correctly for information and moving information. As I mentioned earlier, we have a fantastic inspection area now through the logbook, and I could be on the site and Nigel sat in the office and I can send you the report of my inspection within 5 minutes, you know. So there's lots of good advantages, but it's how you manage it, I think.
Okay, then. So here's another question. So, hi. How can a safety officer sign a checklist without any knowledge of inspection? They should be able to be on board on inspection. So,
Okay,
Jason.
I'll answer that question because this is a question close to my heart. I totally agree with the sentiment that's being made. Is my expectation that every single safety officer is competent to know about every single machine and every single thing that goes on the construction site? The answer is no. He's not a plant and machinery man. He may be a qualified engineer, but generally speaking, the answer would be no. The reason why the safety officer is checking is that he's actually checking for process. He's not checking for the detail around the inspection. So he's checking to make sure that the competent person is actually doing his job. That's the reason why that happens. So it's a countersign rather than doing the inspection himself. However, I do believe that the person who is checking and signing is not just signing a document, he's also speaking, communicating to the person who's doing the inspection. So, for example, if the operator has checked the oil, he'll be asking the question, how did you check the oil? How much oil is there? When was the last time it was changed, and so on. So, my point here is that it's a communication. Actually, they're part of the same team, and it's not someone who's simply just pointing fingers at someone doing something incorrect or correct. So I think, and also the fact is that if he's a good safety officer, then he'll be part of that learning experience for himself also. Okay, does that answer it? I think that's a fairly fairly
Yeah.
clear response.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so this time it's more of a rescue plan question. So, if you're using a single hook lanyard, how can you move to another platform in case of platform to platform rescue?
The answer is you're not. You're using a double lanyard. If you're
And
using a single lanyard, then you need to have another lanyard at the landing stage. There has to be two lanyards for this.
It's we talk about rescue plans, and you have to try your rescue plan, and make sure it works. So it is in a case of having the right PP to do that body movement. I would agree there 100%. But I think also what we should never forget is if I do my function checks at the beginning of the shift and I practice and demonstrate that the working, then we shouldn't, like, platform to platform is the very, very last resort. There's other things we can do on the platform to bring it back to safety. And that goes back to the early beginning. However, if you are going to move into a platform rescue, then we talk about having the right PPE to carry out that rescue. Of course, it's a different activity than just generally operating the machine.
okay, so that's the last question. Oh, wait. We have a buzzer beater question. So, how do we control bypass system?
Oof.
This one is a buzzer beater question. So, before we end, this one just came in. So,
A good, I would say a simple answer of a good pre-use inspection. Every time you're going to use the machine in the morning, make sure that you do a pre-use inspection.
Yeah, absolutely. You're checking. That's why you're checking. You're checking that no one has bypassed the system. Put an alarm system on it to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other areas we could talk forever, I guess, but you can have like track units and things like that built into the machine, so the authorized person is the authorized person to operate that machine. So there's lots of things that we could go on with for sure. It becomes like a card reader, like when you check into the hotel room, you're given an access card, and it acts the same process.
Yeah, I mean, a good example, one of the things that we're introducing on our plant and equipment is that we're using biometrics on our systems now. So only the operator can actually use the equipment. No one else can actually operate it. And that's now being found on many of our machines now.
Yeah, no, it's very good. And it's becoming more and more the norm now, Nigel, and especially in the Middle East, we're seeing this. So it is certainly becoming the norm on a project.
Yeah. As this technology becomes cheaper for us to use, and more available, we're just using it everywhere now. So even on sort of factory machines, that kind of thing, we put biometrics on it, so only the trained operators can use it.
Yeah, no, it's good.
And if you look at things like, for example, the ASLI, for example, if ASLI is switched on, you might have a green light. If it's switched off, you might have a red light. That sort of thing can be installed very easily on equipment.
okay, so that sums up everything. So, Nigel, do you have your last closing remark for everyone who stayed tuned for this webinar? So I think I'll let Nigel take his
Okay.
last thank you words.
Okay, so finally, what I would say is that this equipment is designed to make our lives much more easy on our construction sites. There are huge numbers of hazards associated to it, and we have to be very careful about how we operate it, who operates it. Look at the hazards that surround your sites that could be there, whether it's electricity or whether it's the weather conditions, or even the people who are living and working nearby, have to watch all that sort of things. And finally, what I'd like to say is that, we have in L&T, it's mission zero harm. We expect everybody to go home safe every day. We expect, everybody to has a human right to not be harmed at work. So therefore, Suraksha Pele, we are, we believe in safety first. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It's so honored to be part of this
I
webinar.
appreciate that. Thank you.
So thank you. So again, I will call on Jason to take his last thank you remarks for everyone who joined us today.
Well, first of all, a big thank you to Nigel. I think the key information that Nigel's discussed has been superb, and hitting some real notes and some good takeaways. And I know that Nigel is very passionate about safety and carries a lot of knowledge. I would also thank the sponsors, and for helping us run these kind of events and reaching the right audience. And naturally, my co-pilot Ali, because without Ali's help in running these webinars, I think again, things would go terribly wrong if it was Jason running it. Big takeaway is focus on your work, be professional, reduce the risks in terms of working at heights. So you're talking about inspections or activity, and training never stops. Keep continuing your training and making sure that you're covering the areas which you need to address. So yeah, no, a big thank you, and that's it for me. I will see you in a few weeks.
So thank you so much, Jason, and thank you everyone who joined. So as we move forward in ending this webinar, I'd like to invite everyone to another important webinar scheduled for this October. The topic will be the importance of MEWP, out pre and post use check rescue procedure when managing MEWP operators. So don't get too excited. So this and all the people who registered for this webinar will receive an invitation where you can register for this webinar. And for those who haven't, you can follow us on LinkedIn at IPAF Middle East and South Asia to stay updated on our events and news and for new updates for this upcoming webinar. So for all the attendees of this webinar, we will be issuing certificates which you can use towards your CPD points, and same goes with our future webinars. And another one, this is for Saudi. So Middle East Conference 2024, this October 16, 2024 at Riyadh International Convention and Exhibition Center, Saudi Arabia. So again, thank you everyone who joined us today for this informative webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.